Well, I've spent my last 10 years trying to make money stuff digestible. So we'll see how we go.
Yes. Totally. I think that we're in good hands here. We're feeling really good about it. And like for us, like we just always talk about like we're so shit with money. And so
we're the worst.
Yeah, we're terrible. Like we just didn't kind of grow up learning about it. And I'm sure we'll talk all about why. But we were just like, oh my God, you know, we're sure so many other people feel the exact same way. We need to get someone on the podcast to come and talk to us about this.
And isn't it cool that there is now this appetite, like coming from a grassroots level, that especially young women want to talk about money? Like they actually want to be in control of their financial future, even if there's some level of discomfort and they're in a bit of a debt pickle or whatever it might be. There is a strong desire to want to be in control, and I think that's relatively new in the grand scheme of things. Like our grandmothers and many of our mothers didn't have that.
Totally. Well, I think it just like comes from a fact that like we're like, okay, we're women, we want to be able to do it all, and like this is definitely like a big thing that stands out to me, that like still like I, you know, when I kind of like sit around with my boyfriend and we're like chatting, like he just knows, like, you know, I'm smart, I'm like switched on, I'm driven, but like he just knows so much more than me about like all this, I don't know, like investing and like saving money and stuff. And I'm like, why don't I know any of this stuff? It's like completely bizarre. And I feel like if I was a guy, like me, but a guy, I would know it all.
That is so interesting, because that is why I got interested in this space. Exactly that reason. How come at the pub we have the boys talk about money stuff and girls don't? Like, and I think we're starting to see a bit of a shift, but like 10 years ago, I was like, this is ridiculous. We've all got to talk about it. But like, it is a gender thing, whether it comes from subconscious or whether it's part of our like sort of cultural or natural interests. I'm not sure.
So where does that come from? Do you like, I mean, I know that you've read all the things and done all the research. So like where does that start? Is it like dads speaking to their sons about it, and not necessarily like the daughters don't get spoken to about finances, or like where does that kind of come from?
So I think that there's probably two like parts that it comes from. So the first is historically, if you look back at our grandmothers and great grandmothers, and they might have bought the groceries and probably been given an allowance to do that, but they weren't planning and doing the long-term sort of financial decision making. And I think that even if we think we're the new modern independent woman, those subconscious belief systems of women aren't money managers and all those sort of things are real in our psyche, whether we know it or not. And so I think we have to, as a society, and even through money conversations with our friends and our sisters, and our gradually sort of peel those layers off and get rid of that old school thinking. And then the other thing, and I'm really noticing it with having a little boy and a little girl at the moment, that sort of nature versus nurture thing, that they can both be playing with a truck, and the little boy, you know, rams it into the wall, and the little girl wraps it in a blanket and carries it round.
Aww.
And so I think that there is like, we are made differently, and the financial services industry is majority led by men, created all the products and services created for men, like all modeled around a 25, you know, even the super modeled around a 25-year-old male working for 40 years and retiring at 65. And that's not how women live.
Yeah.
Our patterns are different, and our way of communicating is different. And I think that the financial services industry also needs to change to engage women.
So do you feel like it is changing a little bit now? Like, do you feel like with kids, you know, it's going to kind of become more even, that people are going to speak to the little boys and the little girls about making money? Like, I remember there was this program at school called like Dolomites, where you kind of started to learn how to, I don't know, save a little bit and things like that. Do you feel like that's like coming through a little bit more?
Definitely. And I think then our, like, you know, the next generation, I speak to so many young mothers, and they desperately want to change their ways so they can change the ways for the next generation, right? It's such a driver. So I think that's really exciting, and I think we'll see a huge wave of change in the next couple of generations.
Yeah, that's really cool, because I actually read a fact that you talked about, like speaking of super, that you've said that women retire on half the amount of savings as men do.
Yeah.
And why is that? Is that because we earn so much less than them?
So there is
works?
There is a few reasons. So it is that. So earning less from the gender pay gap, like literally being paid less for the same job.
Yeah, and I never even thought about the fact that leads to less money in your savings when you retire.
Yeah, well, a percentage of that through your whole life makes a difference, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, women are typically taking on more caring and child raising responsibilities. And so you tend to have a career break at a really pivotal part of your career, where you're either not working or you're working part-time, and then you come back. And I've seen, you know, so many of my extremely intelligent, educated friends do this because they want to focus on the family. They go back in a lower level job than they are capable of because they want that ease in their life.
Yeah.
And so it's all these elements. And then also 2/3 of the like $36 billion in tax concessions go to wealthy men.
What does that mean? Sorry?
So you know how the government gives all these different like tax concessions, like incentives to put extra money into super, or incentives like tax breaks for different reasons.
Okay.
A lot of that goes to men, and not intentionally, but because men are the higher income earners generally and stuff. So when we're seeing women retiring with half the super of men, women over 55 are the fastest growing group facing homelessness.
Wow.
Like it's a national crisis, and the fact that our systems, both our tax systems and our financial services systems, aren't yet dealing with this sufficiently.
Yeah. And I really do feel like it does start from like just that basic thing that we were talking about having conversations with your mates. And it's like, I want to talk about housewives and TV and fashion and fun stuff, but then I also want to talk about business and finances too. But like, I don't even know where to begin with that stuff.
Yeah, that was kind of because we kind of asked around the office as well, you know, like, oh, we're sitting down and we're having this conversation about money. Like, what do you want to know? And like the first thing that someone said was like, I don't even know what I want to know.
Yeah, that's the problem,
you
isn't
know,
it?
like she's like, I just don't even know where to begin. Like, and I think that's like, it stems from like we're having more conversations and we're becoming more aware of the things we don't know, but you don't know how to just kind of like dive in.
I feel like we need to have like group sessions, like get around with like the girls, like once every couple of weeks or once a month or whatever. Like when we're with our boyfriends, they like sit there, like we were on a holiday in Hawaii and they were like learning all about Bitcoin and like,
yeah, they were doing all this Bitcoin stuff and they were like, do you guys want to do it? And we were like, no, we don't get it.
Yeah. You know, and like I feel like we need to like consciously be like, no, let's all sit down and like actually like learn about something like Bitcoin, watch a documentary on it, like, you know, take active steps towards learning more about it and getting involved in those conversations.
Totally. And that's probably from the last 10 years of literally sitting down with groups of women like every single day for the last 10 years, that is the biggest question. Where do I even start?
So where do you start?
Well, that's a big question. So I think I always say, and this surprises people, that the best place to start is actually, and this is great for women, starting with your goals. Like starting with what do you even want to achieve in your life? Like your vision board and your, you know, what kind of things do you want to do in the next couple of years?
Like travel or like maybe like saving for a house, even like pretty things you want to buy, a pet that you want to own that might like cost an arm and a leg because Panther does.
Yeah, he really does. Get insurance, get pet insurance, everyone.
Exactly. So so that sort of, you know, what do you want to do in the short term? And then, and sometimes a bit more of a confronting question, what do you want your post-work life to look like? Because I think this is one of the biggest questions. And because it seems like so far away. It seems like a ridiculous. You don't know who you're going to be. You don't know what you're going to want.
Yeah, and it seems like it's never even going to happen. You're like,
Exactly.
when you're 20, you think I'm never going to be 30. Like that seems like ages away. And then when you're 30, you're like, oh crap, I'm going to be 40 soon.
Exactly. And so to stop having that feeling of like, oh, where's that last 5, 10, 15 years even gone? If you spend some time putting your mind into those different time frames, and I often call it like the 3-pot theory. So your short term, like your 0 to 5 years, your long term, so your post-work years, and then your middle bucket is everything in between. And there's a reason why financially I've separated it in those 3 time frames as well, which I'll explain in a minute. But if you can start to think even really basic stuff, like when you've stopped working, do you want to be able to go overseas each year, each 5 years? Do you want to be able to go overseas for 6 months a year or 2 weeks a year? Or do you want to be able to have air conditioning? Or do you want to be able to have, be able to renovate your bathroom in that 40 years of post-working? There is just these different things that as this young, the younger generations coming through, we think that is all a given. But that's not how the system's set up. So that 9.5% of your each paycheck that your employer has to go into super, like your retirement nest egg, that is only saving for a very basic retirement. So we need to start that if you want to have travel and, more fun things in retirement, which let's be honest, everyone does.
Yeah.
Then we need to, in our 20s, 30s and 40s, be squirreling little bits extra away out of that every time a paycheck comes in. Yeah, we put it in our short-term pot for our everyday living and a bit of, emergency buffer, like safety buffer, and a bit of our short-term goals, what we mentioned before. But we also need to be squirreling a bit into that long-term pot and a bit into that medium-term pot. And that's what I think women don't tend to think about, because it's easier to think about the short term.
Well, and I think so many of us struggle even just with the short term stuff, let alone the middle and long term stuff,
Totally.
I'm struggling to save for the little things, let alone the big things.
Totally. The magic stuff is, and this is where the maths comes into it, that small amounts over a long period of time, with compound interest, so with that sort of your money earning money over time.
Yep, I remember that from maths at school. Yeah.
There you go. And so that is the single most powerful financial concept that everyone needs to understand. And even on the moneysmart.gov.au, it's like the government's consumer financial literacy website. There's a really good lot of calculators, and even just plugging into a compound interest calculator. Oh, how about if I just put $100 a month into a longer term bucket? Oh, over 30 years, that's over $100,000 of extra money that, but you might not miss it month to month.
Yeah. And the way that kind of works is you have $100, and then if you earn a little bit of interest on your $100 and that becomes $110, next time you're earning interest on $110. So then it becomes a little more, etc., which is really cool.
Yeah. And so that's why I think that it's really important to start thinking about your long term when you're younger, because you only have to do little bits along the way to make a big difference, like hundreds of thousands of dollars difference to your future, where I spend so much time speaking to women in their 50s and 60s who it's very hard. They don't have time on their side. If they don't have big incomes and they're still supporting children and stuff, it's very hard to get another $100,000 into your sort of long-term pot.
Yeah. So at a very basic level, if someone's listening to this and they're like, oh, like we were talking about before, oh, when I'm 60, I'll deal with it kind of thing. Why should we care about this stuff as women? Why should we want to start having these conversations and want to start talking about this?
So maybe it's easier, that post-retirement thing, really, it's hard to think, it's hard to get your head around, right? But if you think about not being able to travel, not being able to give gifts, not being able to go out, not being able to to go out for a meal, not being able to buy new clothes, not like all those things, if you want
like doing now,
that you like doing now, if you want to be doing that in the future, you need to be squirreling away along the time. And maybe it's easier to think about in that short-term bucket that if you want to have a career break to do some more learning or to live overseas for a year or to have children or whatever, you could just be like living your life and then just all of a sudden hit age 35 or whatever, whenever you want to do that, but you won't be able to do it, or you don't have as many of the choices because you haven't planned for it over time. Where if you are just squirreling little bits along the way, you create so much more choice and opportunity and even a level of I'm okay financially, like that stress sort of that we all carry a little bit if our money's not sorted.
So it's about being able to achieve the lifestyle that you want to and achieve your dreams. When people might look at their life and be like, oh, I'd never be able to do that. It's oh no, this could actually help you make those things a reality. And also, I guess, creating impact and change about the things that you care about. Does that come into play? Have you found with, I feel younger people now are caring more about, for example, we really feel passionate about animal rights, female empowerment, things like that. Is that a driver?
I think that this is the single most exciting way we are going to engage, really increase women's engagement in the money conversation, is around that. What power, what collective financial power do we have with changing the world?
Yeah.
And I think that it starts with, the makeup we buy and the clothes we buy and the ethics behind that, and everyone, as you say, some people are into animal rights, some people are into human rights, some people are into environmental preservation, etc. And I think that if you link every one of your buying and financial decisions to the impact that has then in the world, makes it really interesting, right? And apply that to investing. So let's say even what Verve's trying to do with our ethical investing, isn't it so much more interesting to put money away for the future if you know it's being invested in renewable energy, in preventative healthcare, in regenerative agriculture, in all these industries and companies that are going to create a brighter future, rather than if you're just, going along and you just put your money in whatever bank that your family has or a super fund that your employer has, your money is very likely to be invested in armaments, in tobacco, in gambling,
armaments being
in weaponry so war.
Yeah.
In products and services that hurt animals, it's absolutely 100% certain that if you haven't made a conscious decision about where you're investing your money, especially in your super fund, then you are investing in these companies. And it's really easy to find out, literally going to the website, and if the information isn't available, it's likely it's not that ethical, but call them. Let's, as consumers, put pressure on, the industries to change.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. So when you talk about investing, so my guy friends, of course, started talking to me about this exact subject, and they were you've got to make sure your investments are green and this and that, and not harming animals. And my first instinct was, oh, I don't do any investments. And then they were well, no, you're part of a bank. And I was yeah. They were you have a super fund. And I was yeah. And they were well, those are your investments. And I was what do you mean? And I didn't even understand how that worked on a very basic level until I started looking into it. And I was oh yeah, you're right. All of these places that I guess am keeping my money. It's not I don't think of them as investments because that's a scary word that I don't dabble in very much. But yeah, wherever I'm keeping my money, they are actually investing on my behalf to earn that interest. Which is crazy. Like, that's a concept I didn't even realize.
Totally. So I did this presentation to the such a fab group of girls who work at Business Chicks yesterday, and we had this really robust, fabulous conversation around, and it was exactly this. They were like, we didn't even know that was an option. But when you do know, especially as someone who already cares about the world, like we care about how we buy, we care about, you know, what organizations we support, everyone, and I think, as you say, the younger generation now, more and more people have something they care about in the world, right? And so it makes it so much more interesting when you can be like, oh, well, I get, like, companies grow when shareholders put money in it. And shareholders can be banks with our savings money, and shareholders can be our super funds with our super money. And so where we choose to put our money, those companies grow. And it's even more exciting because ethical investing used to be like, oh, but I need to take a profit cut to make ethical choices. But it's vastly different now. Like, now there's all this data coming up, and there's an industry body, the Responsible Investment Association of Australasia, and over 3 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, ethical investments are outperforming like mainstream funds.
Cool.
That's amazing.
And so not only are you doing it from a, you know, I care about the world place, you're also doing it because it's
you get
making more
of a
money.
Reward.
Yeah,
that's so cool. So once you've kind of taken that first step of like really getting your head around like, okay, I should be saving for my short-term goals, like my travel and my Panther, and then, you know, the middle bucket, and then like when I'm older and want to go traveling and do fun stuff. So then like, what's the next step? Like how does the person in our office who doesn't know about money, like how does she start being more savvy?
So I'm all for setting up your system so you don't have to think about it. So automating your system as much as possible. And this could be as easy as having one bank account for your savings, like to go to Fiji in 18 months or something.
Fun.
One, you know, bank account for your medium term, and then, I mean, we probably can't go into this in huge amounts of detail, but to then maybe every time you get $2,000 in that account, you could buy a parcel of shares or something, and then putting like an extra personal contribution, so you don't only have to do your the 9.5% of your salary that your employer puts in your super, but you can also do a bit extra, and you can just talk to like your payroll, like all the payroll systems now. It's really easy to pay someone and for them to say, I want 80% of my money into my this everyday bank account for my everyday living, and I want $100 a month to go into my super, and I want $100 a month to go into this other bank account. Mm-hmm. And then we you know how you get a pay rise or you get a bit more money, and then you live on the money you have in your bank account, right?
Yeah.
If your money doesn't land in your bank account, that you have your FBOS card, you don't miss it.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned shares there. I'm really interested in that. Like, how do you even know what are shares? Like, where can you get them? Where can you learn about them? Because that's also something that we've kind of talked about. Like, oh yeah, we should invest in something and get some shares. And boys just seem to know where to go. I don't know. Do they have like this secret men's club that like teaches them all of this?
Yeah, it's called being a boy.
Yeah, like I'm just like, where do I even start? I don't know.
So at the moment, we're running a 30-day like investor ready challenge for our members, and so we're about 3/4 of the way through it, and we're having the best conversations because it starts from this: I want to do it, but I don't know where to go or how to start.
Yeah. Like if I've decided
that
I want to care
old
more.
White men, what's investing?
Exactly. So I think it's important to start from the basics and say, well, what is a share, right? We know what a business is. A business is like our supermarket. It has products. People walk in the door, buy the products, each of those products, some of it goes to paying for the cost of goods and some of it is profit. Each year, every company hopefully makes a profit. They invest some of that profit back into the business, so they might get more products or invest in technology or buy more stores or whatever. And then the other part of the profits either goes to who owns the business, or if they're a listed company, so they're on the stock exchange, it goes to their shareholders, and in the form of, like, the financial jargon, dividends.
Okay.
And so you get a percent as a shareholder. You get a percent of the profit. So you might own, a tiny little amount of those shares. So you get that same percentage of the profit, right?
So you basically own a little piece of the company.
Exactly.
So then you get a little piece of the profit.
Yeah. And I think when you break it right down to that, women get that, because we're all consumers. We go in, we choose different products every day. And so we work in different places. So naturally, we know, and I think women have really great intuition. There's lots of cool reporting now, that research now, that women make really good investors for a couple of reasons. But like using that intuition of what do you think the trends are in the future, and what businesses do you think will still be around and really taking over and growing in 30 years? And
yeah, like no one's investing in petrol anymore because, like, obviously, like, we don't like it and we don't think there's going to be a big future in that. So what else can we look at?
Totally. And so starting with that really common sense approach, right? And then how when you start thinking about something, there's that part of your mind that subconsciously collects information. Like, have you had a funny goal that, something you've had on your mind, and then all of a sudden you're in the car and you hear that radio interview, or you...
Totally. It's like when you're looking at a car that you like really want, and then all of a sudden you see them everywhere.
Totally. So that's like a part of our brain called our reticular activating system. And it's so powerful because even starting that money... So even if you got to a point of what we've just got to in a conversation with some girlfriends at the pub, then you are naturally, next time you go into the mall or something, going to have a little piece of your brain thinking as a shareholder rather than just as a buyer, right?
Yeah.
And so once you sort of start to get your head around those basics, then you want to know a bit more about the mechanics. Okay, well, how do you actually become a shareholder?
Well, and like, how much money do you need to become a shareholder?
Sure.
Like, do I need to be a millionaire? Do I need to have $100? How much money do you have to put it into some shares?
So this is another thing why I am really passionate about women getting interested in investing in shares, because while there's like all these nerves of, I'm never going to be able to buy a house because I need to get this mega deposit together, la, 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 la. With shares, you can buy a piece of 200 companies for $1,000.
Yeah.
And so if you setting up, what you need to do is set up an online trading account, and these are linked to a lot of the banks or Google, like CanStar, or those financial comparison sites. No. If you want to find the best savings account or find the best credit card or find the best...
Oh, okay, so it's kind of like Expedia.
Yeah, for travel, but there's finance ones.
Cool.
Got it.
And so you've got to take them, like Expedia and all the travel ones, with a grain of salt, because obviously they make money from click-throughs, so they might only list the ones that they've got relationships with rather than what's everything out there. But they're a good place to start. And so Google online share trading account, right? Or if you bank with one of the major banks, they will have one, and they're all much of a muchness. It's as easy and it's free as setting up a bank account. So you just register. Mm-hmm. And what that gives you access to is a big list of all the companies that are listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. So, the big telcos, the banks, the resource companies, the emerging, tech companies, all of them. And so then you can literally transfer some money into that account, like $1,000 or $2,000. And why I use that as a benchmark, I tend to say $2,000 as a minimum purchase amount each time you buy, because you might pay $12 to $20 as a fee to buy. And so you don't want to pay that fee if you're only buying $100 because it will eat into your...
that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's why I tend to say, you know, if you're paying $20 fee and you're and you are purchasing $2,000 worth of shares, that's 1%. So it's, you know, it's not a big chunk of your...
And then, so that's one way of doing it. And then, because when I was chatting to my friends about it, a couple of them had recommended to me that I could go down that route, which like, I don't know, I'm like, I'm so busy. That sounds like high maintenance. And so then they had recommended to me this like platform that's basically like you give it your money and then it invests for you. And I was trying to look up the name of it, but maybe you know the name of a couple, but it was so great because I could tell it what I liked and what I was interested in. Like I could click all my interests. Like, this is the things I care about. These are like my absolute do not want to invest in, like a petrol or fossil fuel. And then it took my money and invested it for me.
Those sort of what they're like Roboadvice platforms are really awesome because as you say, you're busy, you want someone else to do it for you. You might pay a little bit for that service, but at least you're doing it, right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of those cases, you can then set up $100 a month or smaller amounts that might be and just pop it in there. So they are an awesome way to invest small amounts of money but have access to lots of companies because you know that concept like not having all your eggs in one basket, like diversification. So if you this is really important for investing because especially when you're starting out, you don't want all your whole portfolio, like your first $2,000 in one company, right? Because if that company could go up or could go down but if you invest in like platforms like that have a diverse like a lot of companies that they invest in, or if you've logged into your online trading account and you invest in a fund that like tracks an index, so it might track the top 500 ethical companies in the world or whatever it might be, then your $2,000 has access to those 500 companies. And so at any one point, some of them might go up, some of them might go down, but you're tracking the average. So you don't have the real highs or the real lows. And so that's a really great way to manage, especially early in your portfolio.
Okay, I feel like I've got my head around this middle bucket pretty well. Like that all makes quite a lot of sense. What about the short-term bucket? Like through 10,000 Girl, you worked with a lot of people. Was that more on that like short-term saving? Do you want to talk a little bit about what you did there with 10,000 Girl?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of it's really important to get your head around your early stage priorities because if you don't have your short-term bucket sorted, you're not ready to invest because
you're always scrambling.
You want to have a general level of stability, and what gives you that? Three things. So one, you want to have your personal debt under control. So by personal debt, I mean anything that you're probably paying a high interest rate for, like store cards, credit cards, personal loans, and may not have anything behind it. So not like a home loan or a car loan that, you know, if you really got into a pickle, you could sell that and get rid of that debt. But a lot of times
like
people...
credit card debt.
Exactly. For a holiday or clothes or something that you couldn't like sell. Yeah. So you want to absolutely prioritize that because with debt, you're paying interest and it's absolutely not doing anything for your financial picture. So while you're in that cycle, it's very hard to get ahead.
Oh my God, I'm so guilty of that. Like I always just
She's so guilty.
I'm constantly just like got this credit card debt that I'm trying to pay off. And then I'm like, why do I even have a credit card? Like I should just have
Yeah, well, I cut up my credit card like 2 years ago. I know. I was like, because I was just like constantly like, oh, I have a few $1,000s I need to pay off on that. And it was annoying me. So I just cut it up. Now I only have a savings card and I feel free.
Why do we have credit cards? Like it's so, I don't need one. I'd rather have a savings card. Like, and then I'm spending
I just want to spend what I have. I don't want to spend what I don't have. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
And also, I think that people, once they get in that pattern, they think what money's on their credit card is their money.
Yeah.
I see this all the time, and I like really try and help people change their mindset around that is not your money. That
Yeah,
is,
whoa.
yeah.
That's
So
powerful.
true. Yeah.
And if you have, let's say, a $5,000 credit card debt, and you have that for 5 or 6 years, and you've bought a jumper in June 5 years ago, you have essentially 5 years later paid at least double, or if not more, for that jumper.
Whoa.
And so,
You can tell we're not really like good savers.
no, but this is such an awesome conversation, especially, and I have full blame for the banks. They make their money from credit cards, right? So some of us have some money in savings and some of us have some debt with the banks. And, you know, at the moment, they might give you 1% for your savings, like your interest, but then on your credit card, you might be paying 20% interest. And so the banks are making that margin, right?
they're
Because
making
they're lending out.
19%.
Yeah. So they want people to have high interest debt. And they want them never to pay it back. So let's say on average, like Australian credit card, this is the average of everyone, not just people with a credit card, like $3,500 or whatever. If you're paying 21% interest, if you pay the minimum repayment, so what the bank needs you to
Requires
pay,
from you.
that is going to take you over 90 years to pay back, and over
my God.
$27,000 in interest.
Whoa.
And
For
if
$3,500.
And if you only have like, you don't have all the $3,500 to just get rid of it now, but if you can just add a bit more than the minimum repayments, like paying, even just like $50 more or whatever, like it doesn't have to be a big amount, but more than the minimum repayments, you can bring that time frame like right back to 2 or 3 years and $1,000 interest. Like, so that's the maths, and that's compound interest, not on your savings and investing, but working
On the other side.
on the other side. The maths is powerful, right? And so again, plug your money into a credit card repayment calculator on the Money Smart website. You know, it's not backed by a bank or anything, so it's not, angling you to borrow more or whatever. And give yourself some motivation to be like, oh, how about if I just put that extra $10 or $20 a week in there? Whoa, I could get rid of it this year, That's a really good feeling.
That's
so
amazing.
cool.
And then what about like in terms of where you're spending your money? Because like I recently got an app called Pocketbook. I don't know if you've
Great.
heard of
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And so because I just like felt like, and even speaking to the girls in the office, we were all like laughing. We were like, we spend all this money and like we don't even know what it's on, like particularly now that we don't even have like physical money. You're just like tapping away your tapper.
totally.
And then all of a sudden you spend all this money. So I found this app called Pocketbook that I downloaded, and it basically, you start to input the information, like it connects with your back end of your bank, and then you tell it like, oh, this was coffee, oh, this was a gift, oh, this was personal care, and then it starts to be smart and it starts to just like categorize itself, and then it will send you like a monthly report, or like you can create budgets for yourself. So after I think like 2 months of just me like looking at how I was spending naturally, then I started to make like budgets for myself, and then it would so I'd say like, because I like to get my lashes done, I like to get a facial, so maybe I'll like set my personal care budget or whatever for like $300 or something for a couple of months, and then it would send me notifications like, you've spent 50%, so then I know like, oh shit, I have to cancel my haircut and stuff like that, which is helpful.
It's so cool how technology can help us with our willpower and awareness and stuff without having to go into a dirty old spreadsheet and
Yeah,
totally.
totally.
Yeah, I feel like we all just shut down if we see a spreadsheet.
Exactly. So it's really cool, these like tech, options available. And so that can really help then with working out, well, how much can you put into your debt repayment, into your, so just back onto this short-term buffer, because that knowing your spending then helps you with your short-term bucket, right? Your management of how you set it up. So you want to put everything else on like minimum repayments, or stop any other spending or invest like longer term stuff you can, and put it all into your personal debt and get rid of that. Like,
yeah, okay.
dirty
that's like
debt
step
that we
one,
can't-
no debt. We don't want to live in debt.
Totally. There's some good debt, like, your home loan and stuff.
Mortgage
That's
or
like,
whatever.
that's okay. And like, but but the debt that isn't making you money is bad. And so once you've got that, then you want to have a bit of a safety buffer. And so then you can look at your app and your spending and say, okay, well, if, you know, this is going to personal care, this is going to food and groceries, this is going to whatever, well, what's going into my savings, you know, and actually then set up one bank account for your everyday spending and one bank account for your like emergency buffer and one bank account for your shorter term goals, like the holidays and stuff that you want to do in the next couple of years. And I think that separating your bank accounts and then having like, some feeds so you have some awareness of where your spending's going and stuff, you can work out then what you want to put in each bank account and set it up, and then you don't have to think about it. But you know that it's growing in the places you want it to be.
That's such awesome advice, because for me, like I just like kind of I have 2 bank accounts, but I kind of just use them both for the same thing. And I think having it there in your 3 different bank accounts means, okay, I know this is my savings, I'm not going to touch that. And then mentally you're just like, I don't have that. So it's just like a total shift.
And don't have a card for those. Like you can cut up, even if the card arrives, cut it up and like, because then you absolutely have to be so consciously pulling money out of it if you do that, rather than, I'll just use that card today or whatever.
And it's pretty cool, like if that's just in your back of your mind, then like rather than like going out for brekkie, you might just be like, oh well, like, you know, it's towards the end of the month and I really wanted to hit my goal, so like maybe I'll just stay in, or I've got leftover food so I can just like cook dinner for my friends or something like that. Just like being a bit more aware and a bit more in control, I guess.
Oh, I've seen the most incredible stories of, so whether it's really young women, you know, starting their career and having their paychecks for the first time and how they set it up and how that makes you feel, or whether it is women that have gone through like abusive relationships and are resetting their life and their money's now in their control rather than, you know, having it controlled for them. Once you set up your system and you make your conscious money decisions, you feel so good. Like there's just another part of you that is this new confidence and security and stability, and that plays out in different parts of your life as well.
Totally. It sounds like, you know, I already feel like a little bit lighter just from listening to this and thinking about going and doing it. And I guess like, you know, we all now put aside time for like our physical health and exercise, and we put aside time for our mental health and meditation. Should we be putting aside weekly time to like dedicate
financial
to our
health?
Love that. And you know, have you heard of the Barefoot Investor, Scott Pate? So he's great, and he's got like some really great ideas about having monthly money dates and stuff, whether it's with yourself or your decision-making unit, you know, whoever you're making your money decisions with. And I think there's a lot of merit in that. And if, you know, weekly or monthly or annually, whatever suits you and your lifestyle and your thinking and stuff is fine, as long as it's regular.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, we've kind of talked about the short term and the middle term, but with the long term, we want to hear more about Verve. We were like so excited when we found Verve. Just like even the Instagram, like, you know, it's a super fun, but it's like a super fun that you want to follow on Instagram. I feel like you're doing something right, you know, like you've got good
yeah,
news
like
on
a
there.
super fun that we want to get involved with, you know, doing something right.
Exactly, because like when you hear super fun, you're like switch off completely. But like, yeah, you guys are just doing something so different, and we want to totally hear all about that, and then also about this like longer term bucket.
Just makes my heart so happy, because our whole goal, like, you know, there's 3 of us, 3 girls that have come from really different backgrounds, like and this is our goal, to start money conversations, to build women's financial engagement and confidence, and to build women's wealth, you know, like to put more money in women's pockets, because we know that women tend to make decisions that are more aligned with, you know, the good things for society and for the environment, and for like women are really leading a lot of these sort of ethical and sustainable movements. And so it's really cool that we can bring that into the money space now. And so that's what we're trying to do with Verve. So Verve's Australia's first women's super fund. And what we want to do is close that retirement savings gap. So, you know, those horrible stats we were talking about earlier, we want to make them gone. So our little girls and stuff do not even know about those stats, right? And I think that there are a couple of ways to do that, and this is what we're trying to address. One, the actual product design needs to be different. So our fees are different. So we don't charge fixed fees when you have really low balances, or we don't charge fixed fees when you're on parental leave, or so those little things, because the fees eat away at women's super in those times, you know, when you're starting out and when you're having career breaks. And so there's those little things like fee stuff, and then the ethical investing piece. And that's what's really like exciting, because if you put your money into, you know, companies and industries and stuff that we believe in and that you're interested in, then you are naturally more interested in following the progress of that, right? And I think that that's why we're getting this really cool feedback, like what you say, that, oh my gosh, I feel like this super fund is like my friend. And, you know, like I feel like for the first time I want to consolidate my 13 super funds, and I feel like I actually want to know where my money is, and I want to put more in there. And, you know, like that is the kind of stuff that changes people's futures.
Well, and I think what's so great and so clever about what you guys are doing as well is like you're building a community. Like everything now, like when we talk about like running a brand, we're like, oh, it's not just enough to just sell shoes. You know, we want to create a community, and that's exactly what you're doing with Verve, which has never existed in a super fund. So Christina, one of your co-founders, was telling us about this amazing Facebook group that you guys have where people just like will post asking questions about like their finances and what do they do, and kind of like all sharing the knowledge. That's just like, that's amazing.
So cool. And then you run education sessions as well for women, right? Like Christina was telling us how you've helped people get out of like this crazy credit card debt. It's just so cool.
So do you know how many times I've cried from that Facebook group? Like cried with just gratitude and love for the members of that, just, you know, vomit out their credit card debts and what they're doing about it and stuff, because then everyone else says, well, me too, and maybe I want to fix mine, and my debt-free day is this. And it's incredible what women do when they put something out there and then someone else can help them, and then, oh, I've been there too. Or then the older women that just absolutely fill my heart with so much gratitude, because they're like, please, girls in your 20s and 30s, please do this, this, and this. These are the things that I didn't do that I wish I did, you know?
They want to help.
They
want it to be different.
They want it to be different.
Future generations.
Exactly.
I can't talk right now.
And I think like women can do anything that they put their minds to. We just need to put our minds to this.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think starting the conversation, like if people take one thing out of even this podcast, it's start a money conversation. Because out of every exchange, we learn something, right? And then that something might lead us to the next money conversation, or bit of information or action we might take in our lives, or change that we might create. And it doesn't have to be this big, overwhelming thing that we have to change all at once. Just thinking of it as one conversation at a time, or one tweak in our mindset, or one new bank account separate bank account that's set up, or, you know, it just has to be little things, because like our health journeys or our, you know, whatever other sort of tracks we're on in our life, our money stuff and like our financial journey is a lifetime piece. And so it's not something that you have to do all at once. Just think of it in little bite-sized pieces.
Yeah,
totally. So I feel like from this, like I need to set like a goal of like, what am I going to do today because of this conversation? I'm going to get rid of my credit card debt. That's the first thing I'm going to do.
I'm going to get back on Pocketbook, because I got like really lazy with it for a while, and then they started sending me notifications, and I was like, whatever, I'm spending my money, bye. But I'm going to get back on it.
Yeah, because hearing you talk about that, I'm like, I want to be able to have like $2,000 that I can go and invest in something. That would be so good. So first step, got to take care of my short-term bucket.
I just love that you've ended on this note, because this is how I end all the workshops we run. That like we go around in a circle and say, right, what is everyone's number
First
one
step.
action?
Oh, it wasn't
Yeah, I
even
love
planned.
that.
It was just like inspired
Love
by
it
hearing
so
you talk
much.
about that.
There actually is one other thing that I wanted to mention earlier when you were kind of talking about like saving little pieces at a time. Have you heard of this app called Raise?
Yeah, right. So there's a few apps and stuff that are out there at the moment, and there's pros and cons, right? So the idea that you're just rounding up each purchase, so if your coffee's $4.80, that 20 cents you might say to round to the nearest dollar or something like that.
Yes.
And
so that's how it works. So they round up the spending for you, and then they put that part in savings. So
And that's just like 20 cents. Like you're not even going to notice it was gone.
Exactly. So that's the good things about that is that it takes away our need to do, like anything that you can automate, take your willpower out of it, is great. But you've got to be aware that some of these things come with a cost. So, I don't want to say any particular products are good or bad, but just be aware of the investment costs associated with where that money is going. Okay. But there are more and more of these solutions available, and I know there's more and more coming on the market. So definitely a space to watch and a tool to play with. If it works for you, great, keep using it. If it doesn't work for you, try something else.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good attitude to have, because even you don't want to feel like you set up Pocketbook or whatever and you use it for a while and that's all really great. But then you fall off the wagon, and we all do that with our health or with whatever. We don't want to then feel, I'm not doing it.
Guilt.
Like that is the worst, because then that money chat comes in of, I'm not good with money and and we want to get that out. We want to do little things that are really achievable. So all the time we're like, I'm getting on top of my money, and I know more than I thought, and I am actually getting ahead, and I do know this stuff, and we want that chat in our heads, right?
Yes.
And so I think that more important than the action is that it's really achievable. And so you're building your confidence just little bit by little bit. And with the things like Pocketbook, even if you say, you know what, just once a year, I want to do a review with it. And once I set up my automatic accounts and stuff, you don't have to then be looking at that and stressed by that every day, because you know that your money's going into the certain different accounts and you don't have to worry about it, because we want to take the money stuff out of our heads, not put it in. Like, money is not our goal. Money is the enabler to live our lives,
100%.
right?
I love that you said there that women always say, I'm not good with money, because like that totally resonated. I feel like we both say that all the time. I'm not good with money. And just like we need to speak to ourselves positively, positive affirmations in terms of like being mindful. I feel like that's so important as well, that we wouldn't even think about that we're doing, but let's all be more positive to ourselves in saying like, I've got this. I do know how to, why does a guy know more than me? We can all be good with money.
And starting and saying, and like having the chat that, I do talk to my friends about money.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to my friends about money.
Yes.
I can't wait for my friends to listen to this podcast.
I love it, girls.
Should we head into Quickfire?
I think we should.
So, first question, what's the most beautiful view you've ever seen?
Ooh, do you know what? I think it's on the farm where I grew up and where the sun set outside the kitchen window.
Oh,
the pepper
and
trees.
is that in Wagga Wagga?
Yep. Or half an hour out of Wagga.
Oh, cool. Okay. So I said to you before, when we Googled you, all these pictures of you wearing incredible earrings came up. So we wanted to know, how many pairs of earrings do you own?
Oh, I used to have so many and it was so fun. I used to collect jewelry from all around the world where I lived, like with different communities when I was doing humanitarian work and stuff. And I used to collect all these different beads and make all this beautiful jewelry and sell it at markets and stuff. And now with a 4-year-old and 2-year-old, like, I only have one of each, so I have a lot of ones. But
That's
literally,
cool.
I probably, I need to make it. Can you guys make that a trend so I can be
Jess
cool?
often wears one earring.
Oh, that is awesome. I'm going to start.
Yeah.
And so I literally probably only have 4 that I have a set of at the moment and that don't dangle and can't be pulled by a baby.
Okay.
Great. I love it. Raw answer.
What's the last thing you saved up to buy?
Ooh. I think that, So it's really funny you ask that, because I'm so automated in my like system. When I now need to buy something, I often like have money available to do it because
we're jealous. We all need to be
No,
here.
but you know what? It didn't start like that. Like when
Yeah.
I was 24 and started the 10,000 Girl campaign and stuff, I was sitting in the same space as what we've been talking about and thinking, I want to be good with my money, but I don't know how to do it. And that's how it started, as pub conversations with my friends. And now like I've interviewed, thousands and thousands of financial planners and sat with like hundreds of women. And it's so ingrained in me now that just the system's set up. And so when I need to buy something, I know what pot it can come out of. And I don't really need to save for a specific thing, But actually, one big thing we're saving for, we're building a new commercial kitchen at the moment.
Oh, yeah, for your other business.
And that's our
Jeez,
main
you're busy.
focus,
That's
financial
a good thing to
focus.
save for. So we know you're from the country, and we want to ask, what is the most country thing that you do?
That I do now or have done?
Either.
I was a real motorbike kid when I was little.
Really?
Yeah, used to round up all the sheep, used to love it.
Oh my
my
God,
God.
that sounds so fun.
Amazing.
Okay, last question. If someone listening to this podcast takes one step towards saving more money, what would you advise it should be?
I think it's about the money conversation. So if you start a money conversation, what you're doing is creating, like bringing your plans to life and creating some accountability in your life as well. So maybe tell someone what you want to do. And so next time you see them, you'll be like, oop, I still need to do that. And like quickly open that bank account or do a free learning to invest in shares course on the ASX website or whatever, wherever you're at.
Okay, amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. I
Thank
just learned
you.
so much. What an intense learning hour. It's so fun.
So good. Thanks so
Thank
much, Zoe.
you.